came up with the answer A equals 0, and we also discussed how we did that. So today, we're actually going to represent relations and functions. So take a minute and get that into your spiral notebook, into your table of contents, and on the correct page. All right, so you should have been discussing in your group what domain and range is. Raise your hand if you think you can tell me anything about either of those words. Good. Domain is my x value. Range is the y value. Input, very good. You're the first one to get that keyword today. Input. Now, wait a second. We'll get all those words here in a second. So, he gave us input. Output's my range. Anybody know another name for domain? One more. Or input. Not by x-intercept. I'm looking for independent. So 3 keywords there, and you guys came up with 2 of the 3. It's known as my input, my independent, or my x. And then my range is known as output, dependent, and y. So I'm pretty impressed. You guys remember that back from Algebra 1. Raise your hand if you remember hearing the word functions in Algebra 1. I won't call on you, I'm just asking. Okay, so quite a few of you remember the word function. I'm going to write that down, function. Anybody remember the definition? Anybody, remember hearing the definition? I won't call on you, just give me it. Just remember, did you guys talk about a definition in Algebra 1? Yes. Okay. All right. Does anybody remember any part of the definition? Okay, that's honest. I like that. So, I will tell you, I actually had Mr. Sherwin, I believe, for Algebra 1. He talked about functions. And I was like, all right, we learned about functions. We won't have to learn this in Algebra 2. And I sat in this room, and I learned functions in Algebra 2 with Mr. Preston. And I'm like, okay, they just really want us to know it. We don't need to know it after Algebra 2. So I took Algebra 3, and I actually took it with Mr. Dominka. And he started with functions. Okay. I get to calculus back here in this room. Mr. Preston again, and Mr. Preston starts out the year talking about functions. Like, okay, it's a Carm City thing. Carm City really beats it into you and wants you to know what a function is. Now, I went to college, my first day of college. I'm sitting in a calculus class, right? And the teacher writes the word function on the board. I was like, no way. So it's a definition you need to know and memorize. And I have it memorized mainly because 5 classes have wanted me to know this. And the definition is, for every input, there is exactly, and that's a key word right there, 1 output. You've heard that before? Now, you know I will not make you memorize things that I don't feel are necessary, right? I'm going to tell you this. The definition you need to memorize. Mainly because when you take Algebra 3, and if Mr. Williams is still teaching it, he's going to say, we're going to talk about functions. You can recite the definition for it. When you take calculus, you can recite the definition. When you take trig, you can recite the definition. And when you finally go to college and take your college math class, you can recite the definition. Key definition, right? Okay. So for every input, there's exactly 1 output. So I've got a little practice here, and you don't have to copy this slide down, but it's a little sorting activity. So I've given you some graphs, I've given you some points, I've given you some XY tables, and we're going to see, are they functions or are they not? Okay? Katie, come on up. Don't be scared, because you went out. You have 10 options to choose from. You pick whichever option you think it is, and pull it over to function or not a function. By the way, if Katie is wrong, it's not a big deal. We just talk about it. Uh-oh. So what do we know then? It's a function. Now why? Notice for every one input, there's only an output. So yes, S and T both go to 6, but S only goes to 6 and T only goes to 6. So that one says, well, go going into the correct spot. When it goes in the right spot, it goes off there and hand it to whoever you like. Yes, 10 of you will be coming up to the board. You get to pick whichever one you want now. Whichever one you want there, Mackenzie. Ah. Okay, so Katie kind of helped you out on that one, didn't she?
Yes.
See? It's a learning experience. That's what's great about this. Come on up. You get to pick whichever one you want. 8 left. That one works. Go ahead and hand that off. By the way, that one works because for one input, there's an output. For one input, there's an output. For one input, there's an output. Notice all of my X values are different. All right, Sydney, which one are you choosing? Very good. Hand it off. Notice here she has 2 X values going to 2 different numbers, right? One is going to 2 and one is going to 8. That's bad. Can't have that. Lovely. Great job. Great job. Dawn, you're down to 5. 5.
Yeah.
Wonderful. If I look here, my X is 1. My Y is actually at like 4-ish. By the way, I understand it if you're in the back and you can't see that. Okay, but if I draw a line, it only touches once on that line. That's something we'll talk about here on the next one. Going the opposite way doesn't work. Go ahead and hand that off there. 3 left. 3 left. By the way, you can't pick somebody that's already come up. Do pay attention to who's coming up. Ooh, good. Go ahead and hand that off. By the way, this one is not a function because here at this X value, it equals this Y value, this Y value, this Y value, this Y value, this Y value. Infinite, right? All along that Y. Wonderful. Last one. Who are you picking? Got the last one up here. Correct. Wonderful. So, a little sorting activity to help us out, right? Okay. So now let's actually do an example that you may see like on essential work. Go ahead and copy down number 1. Copy down number 1 for me. So we're trying number 1, and it does ask us to identify the domain and range. Now, there is a certain way I want you to write this, and only because I've seen several standardized tests, and they all seem to write it the same way on these standardized tests. So if I'm talking about domain, I like to use the letter D. That way it stands for domain. I like to use a capital D. Now, here is the syntax that we need to use. It's a little curly bracket. And I know that's probably scaring Jake because he's like, wait, computer programming all over again. Jake, you only need 2 in domain, I promise, okay? Then we list our numbers from our X numbers in order, from least to greatest. The smallest one that is -1, 3, 4, and 5. And then we end it with another curly bracket. If you can't draw curly brackets, I'm not that picky. That counts as a curly bracket to me. I'm okay with that. Do not use a parenthesis. That's not a curly bracket. That's different. Does that make sense? I'm not going to take off points because your curly brackets are not pretty. Okay? All right. Now that I've given you domain, go ahead and do range for me. Okay. Range. So in this case, that'd be -3, -1, and 2. Right? Now, can you graph these 4 ordered pairs? Some of you are giving me this look of like, wait, what ordered pairs? What does the 5 go to? So it'd be 5, comma 2. Does that make sense? Go ahead and put those on a lovely graph for me. Go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to graph 5, comma 2, 4, comma -1, -1, -1. I'm sorry, -1, -3, and 3, comma 2. Do you agree with my graph? Just those 4 points, right? Now, is this a function? Why? So for every every input, there's only one output. So I'm allowed to go to and have 2 inputs that go to the same output. That's fine. But if the 5 would try to go to the 2 and the -3, that's bad. So in this case, it is a function, right? So yes, it's a function. Now, I believe on Friday when I gave you that worksheet, some of you were trying to tell me something, weren't you? And I was up here singing. Was that in your class or was that another class? Another class? I did. It was you guys. La 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 la. Remember that? Yeah, I did that on purpose to you. Because some of you are trying to tell me about this lovely test, vertical line test. Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Wonderful. That's good. The vertical line test says that if I draw a vertical line and it only touches 1 point, then it's a function, right? Okay. So that's another way Jake can test, is it a function? He could draw a vertical line since it's only hitting 1. Now let me change this just slightly. I'm going to change it to blue. I'll put another point right there. Notice now, if I draw a vertical line, is that a function? No, because it hits twice. Does that make sense? So you have that worksheet from Friday. And some of you said, can we go and talk to our group and change some answers? Well, right now, that's what I want you to do. I want you to look back through that worksheet and change any answers you'd like. I'll give you about 30 seconds. Talk to your group, discuss with your group, and try that. So you're looking at your worksheet, and Austin, you were the last one up to the board. Who do you want to pick? Braden, do you think letter A is or is not a function? That is correct. It is not a function. Who do you want? Letter B, function or no? Yeah. It is a function. That is correct. Pick somebody for C. That is correct. It is a function. How about letter D? Who are you picking? It is. Now, before you pick somebody, Josh, let me actually point this out. This open circle doesn't count. The closed circle is the one that counts. So when you draw that vertical line, it's technically only hitting at that bottom circle. So yes, it is. Very good. Pick somebody for letter E. Shane. No, it is not. That is correct. How about letter F? Who are you picking? That is correct. It is a function. Very good. All right. So now we know what a function is and what it is not. I think you did very well there. Here's our next example. We're going to graph. But we're not going to graph y equals mx plus b. We're going to graph it slightly different. I'm going to graph in a way that you can graph any function I give you, any equation I give you. What can you do with anything? Any equation I ever give you, what could you do to graph it? Yeah, that's right, Jake. Make a table, right? He said pick a number for x, plug it in, find y. Now, Jake, this is my way of getting you all involved. We're going to use these numbers. -3, -2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2, and 3. Now, if I was graphing this, I probably would not use all of these. But the reason I do is there's 7 groups, and now there's 7 numbers. So, what I'd like is your group to plug in negative 3 into that equation. Your group, please plug in negative 2. Your group, please plug in negative 1. You guys get 0, 1, 2, and 3. So you're plugging that one number into that equation. Go ahead and do that. That's my way of simplifying and not making you plug in 100 numbers, right? All right. Talk with your group. Make sure you all agree with the number. All right. Here we go. Katie, what'd you get for negative 3? 2. Kinsey, what'd you get for negative 2? 1. Shane, what'd you get for negative 1? Wonderful. Dom, what'd you get for 0? Negative 1. Sabrina, what did you get for 1? Negative 2. Jake. Yep. Negative 3. Alec. Negative 4. All right. See how we filled in the table? Now you can write the rest of the numbers down. You didn't have to do all the work, did you? Only had to do the work for one problem. Sometimes it's nice to work in a group. Because then you can say, okay, you do this part of the table, I'll do this part of the table. But now I'd like you to go ahead and graph those points on a coordinate plane. Graph those points on a coordinate plane. Negative 3, 2, negative 2, 1. And just keep going down the line here. I'll connect those. Now that we graphed it, there's a question. Why is this a linear function? There's a couple reasons. Good, that's a great one. Linear means line, and it forms a line. I agree. Oh, say that really loud. There's no exponents greater than 1. Normally I won't repeat you, but since we're recording, sometimes that's why I've been repeating some of the things you said, because it's hard to pick that up. But that's a great one. No exponents bigger than 1. Right? That's very good. Okay. So you need to know what it means to be linear and nonlinear. Now if I graph it, it's easy to tell it's a line. But if I hadn't graphed it, that was a fantastic way right there. No exponents bigger than 1. Any questions so far? Okay. So I've got one final slide. This is it. 2 problems, 4 and 5. Go ahead and copy them down. And then I want you to say, yes, they're linear, or no, they're not. And then evaluate it when x equals 3. And I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to do that. Go ahead. All right, who are you picking? All right, so Jake, you actually get a choice here. You can either A, tell me if this is linear or not, or you can tell me what it is when x is 3. Okay, so he told me it equals 20, right? Now, there's actually a specific way I want you to write this though. So the function's name is f, and when you plugged in the number 3, you got out 20. So you did all your work, right? And that's perfectly fine, but when you write your final answer, I want you to write it this way. The function's name, the number you plugged in, equals 20. So until then, until you're at the very end, Mackenzie, you can forget about the f of whatever until the very end. Whatever you do, do not divide by the 3. This 3 is my x, this is my y. Okay, who do you want to pick, Jake? Yeah, okay, Haley? Okay, Haley, is this linear or not? Need some help? I don't want this. Josh, repeat your definition one more time. Linear or not now? That's right, it's not. Not linear. Now, so Haley had forgotten that, right? It's only been 3 minutes into their future, and she's already forgotten that. Her future self has let that go. So that's a great thing maybe to write down if you are like Haley in that aspect where, oh, I forgot, exponents greater than 1 mean not linear. In here, if I write it on the board, yes, you need to write it down. But if there's something to help you jog your memory, write that down also. Miss Haley, who do you want to pick? Angela. Which part do you want to tell me? Linear? Or do you want to tell me about the x equals 3 part? Perfect. It is linear. No exponents greater than 1. Who do you want to pick? Sabrina, what did you get when you plugged in 3? -5. Now, once again, we're going to write it this way. G of 3 equals -5. Okay? Any questions? You'll still be okay. But look back to see. Now, how else are you going to double check? Check your answer key. Because it will actually have that on there for you. Speaking of, it is time for essential work. So, here is your essential work due tomorrow. You all just received an answer key. So that is all of the homework that will be assigned this week except for a worksheet on Thursday. The answers are not on here for that. All right.